Hey, what's up? This is Dave Duenas with Leaving the Ring Radio. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And if you can, donate to our Patreon. Keep independent media going.
And welcome back to another edition of Leaving the Ring Radio. I'm your host, Dave Duenas, with my co-host, Mr. Gabriel Montoya. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing good, man. Just got back from an audition where I was auditioning for a lawyer part, so I've got a lot of stuff in my hair. Unlike Canelo, apparently, as we had breaking news, had his hair tested, and there's nothing in it. But I'll slide it back to you, Dave. I'm just pretty shocked you hit me with that in the 30 seconds before we went on air.
Well, Chacal, who's on the Tijuana Boxeo Network, he does a show with Felipe Leon. He's the one that actually sent me the link. It was in Spanish, so I started reading it, and then I got it in English, which was put up as well. And I tell you what, our day's been going well today. Nice, beautiful, sunny day over here in Northern California. Everything's going great, but you got to think that Golden Boy and Canelo are jumping up with joy about the news right now that they received back, because the Sports Medicine Research and Testing Laboratory, a WADA-accredited lab out of Salt Lake City, they returned the sample and what was detected out of the hair follicle that was given back in March 29th from Canelo's head, which is was returned on April 20th. And it was received with a single note in the section reserved for the analyst details, which is hair sample tested for clenbuterol. Clenbuterol was not detected, which means he didn't have anything. As we all know that even after urine, it takes a week. You can still have it in there. It goes away. So you can't really tell whether or not he's been taking it, further back and how long until you give up a piece of your hair, a sample of your hair, which he did. He did that out of the request of the Nevada State Commission, and guess what? He's cleared. There's really not much anybody could really say.
And guess what? They've known since 420. They found out April 20th. And
Right.
people have been talking, a lot of people have been demanding that he do this hair test, and then they jump past that to he's not even going to do it. And, there's other podcasts out there saying this guy's an OG cheat. He's coming up with all these nicknames for him, Canelo, this, that, and the other thing. And are they going to do retractions? Because he did the thing no one said he would do. I mean, we interviewed Victor Conte back in March 5th on the next round and talked about the hair sample. I wrote about this in 2016. There was two other guys, Lucas Brown and Francisco Vargas. I was like, do the hair test. Explained it, cited it. This guy does it 2 years later. He just opened the door. Canelo continues to be, if you really look at it in the long view, an anti-doping pioneer. He's been doing anti-doping with VADA by choice since like 2011, right? And sure, he's not doing the year-round. He's not in the WBC clean boxing program. Maurizio Suleiman tweeted at me that he would be joining it shortly. We'll just keep up on that. But Maurizio's never lied to me. I'm not going to pretend like he has. So I think a lot of people need to be eating a serious amount of crow here. And you got to give props to Canelo for setting a precedent. Now, when people test positive, you got to do the hair test. Because
I'm not a Canelo fan. I think everybody knows this. I'm not a Canelo fan. I'm guilty of making fun of the kid. I'll admit. I'm guilty. Hold on. I'm sorry. I got my little ones here with me, so I apologize if they're barking and screaming in the background. I'll apologize now. But anyways,
they're Chihuahuas, Dave. They're celebrating.
I know.
Actually.
They're Yorkies.
He's clean.
Don't insult them. They're Yorkies, okay? But anyways.
Whatever.
So, but, right now we got a couple of tweets. Let's see. It's Jaime79 says, so what does Canelo clean hair sample really mean? It means that he was telling the truth, that he's not doing anything that he's not supposed to. It was a mistake. He ate some contaminated meat, which, I've got to, the thing is, I argued with a few folks on our Gmail, and the whole trainer and this, the families are all butchers, and I'm like, that's stupid. That is the dumbest way of looking at things. Like, they're at a restaurant, or they're getting cut meat sent to wherever they're at in Mexico. You're telling me that they can automatically see or sense when the meat's not, contaminated? That's like me as a plumber right away walking in without even really checking into it, making a diagnosis of why your system, you got a leak in your system or something. You can't see that. There's no X-ray vision for it. So to answer that, what does it really mean? It means that the kid was really telling the truth. That's exactly what it means. And Jay in 077, he said, shit, it's all we wanted to know. Now we know the rematch is on and up and up. And if he performs poorly in the rematch, then people will still question. Of course, people are still going to question. People are always going to question. That's the way the internet is nowadays, But the thing is that it's all due process. And everybody wanted to jump down the kid's throat, right? Everybody was automatically labeling him a cheater. And that's the sorry fact about it, is that it's going to always be there with him now, no matter what. No matter what it's proved.
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing: is there is no test to say whether or not the clenbuterol was in his system was intentional or not intentional. But people were intimating that this guy was such a cheater, such a roid guy, that he wouldn't even do the test because it would expose him to other things. And here he goes, and he passes the test. End of story.
He gave up the hair sample, which a lot of folks didn't think he was going to do. He gave that up.
Like with Luis Ortiz, that guys won't let it go, that he was exonerated, or that it was blood pressure medicine. There was no intent to cheat proven, and the nandrolone positive, we know it's got a history of contamination. So, no, I'm a person that believes in the law and believes in due process and letting things play out until all the facts are known. I think the facts are known here. That you can't say he's a dirty guy. You have to say, like, this guy's been doing VADA testing before anybody else was doing it, long before Triple G was doing it.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I don't know. I'm a little hot tonight. I had a little caffeine on the way in. Tell me if my mic is too loud. I've kind of made some adjustments audio-wise.
No, it actually sounds really good.
Excellent. Well, we have
really good.
Our first guest, Kurt Emhoff. I hope I'm saying his name right. But let's pull him in to talk about. He wrote a very long, very thorough piece on the Wilder Povetkin, that whole business. So, Kurt, are you there on the line?
I'm here on the line. What's going on, fellas?
We're just kind of basking in the Canelo news. I don't know if you've heard about the hair test and anything. And if so, what are your thoughts?
I didn't actually. I just kind of caught the last half of what you guys were saying. So what exactly came out today?
Dave?
Well, the Nevada State Athletic Commission had asked him for a sample, and he gave that up, and he gave that back up at, what was it, March 29th?
March 29th. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And Salt Lake did the testing.
So the results came in. Yep.
April 20th, they came back.
On the 20th. Right, on 4/20th. Yeah. And it came back that there was no detection of anything else in his system, meaning that what the kid had said originally was, hey, it was tainted meat, it was a mistake, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You guys could do what you want. I'm a clean fighter. Well, there stands truth behind him.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, listen, I think the Nevada Commission has taken some great steps with the thoroughness of their process. If you look at their revamped rules compared to other states, they're miles ahead. And one thing that really hasn't been talked about at all, which I think is great for what they did, they've deputized VADA. Like VADA cannot, when VADA conducts a test now, it's no longer like outside of the commission's jurisdiction, right? Like I know New York had a problem with that when Morales tested positive because it was a third-party test. It wasn't a test done by the commission.
Right.
And it was kind of a similar thing with California, although I thought the commissioner, is it Andy Foster? Is that his name?
Yeah.
He handled it just, he's like, listen, it was an outside of the commission test, but we're not going to bury our head in the sand. We're going to take a look at this and do the right thing. And, I know Vargas's circumstances were different than Canelo's in that he took a test and he was clean while he was in the States, and then he went back to Mexico and popped positive for clenbuterol, but just the trace amounts. So, I thought California handled that very well, but neither of those states has the kind of deputization of VADA and of a WADA testing facility that Nevada has put in. So now they're basically saying, hey, listen, if it's a VADA test and it's done under, the WADA conditions, that's as good as Nevada, conducting the test. So I think that's interesting. But at the same time, their mitigation policy and the strict liability thing. I mean, it's always kind of, it's been argued since WADA came into existence. Whether they should have that strict liability position or not. And I think they did Canelo a little wrong here. I mean, if you have two other states who basically looked at the clenbuterol thing and said. Right. Hey, it's a trace amount. This is consistent with the trace amount. These guys are testing clean now. Let's have a fight. Obviously USADA, which the UFC uses, it seems like, anytime these guys if they're from Mexico or China, or if they've spent time there training and they come back with these trace amounts, they're giving them a pass. And it seems like there was a WADA directive, that pretty much said that. So you've got WADA, USADA, New York, and California going one way. And then Nevada, even though I like the direction they're going in, it's much more structured. It just seems like they gave Canelo a bit of a raw deal, I thought, and just no matter what he did, it seemed like he was going to do some time. He was going to get suspended. I thought that was a little bit of a raw deal. And now with his hair test coming back, it really seems like it's a raw deal, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I thought it was interesting that the lawyer for Triple G, that he was the one that pointed out strict liability. And that, hey, you guys' rules have changed, and right at that moment, that the fight's not going to happen.
Right.
I just think it's a game changer in terms of the biggest star, arguably one of the biggest stars in the sport. I don't know if he's number one, but he's up there. This guy decides to give up his hair sample. The next guy that tests positive for clenbuterol and says, hey, it was contamination, he's going to have to give up some hair, right?
Yeah, I mean that if again what's, and this is another thing that I have a little problem with Nevada's policy. It doesn't really spell out the burden of proof, or it very much limits the burden of proof for the fighter to kind of rebut that presumption that he's had a doping violation. To me, I mean, it would be pretty compelling evidence, even though, I mean, I've definitely seen some things where these hair samples are, there's a little bit of inconsistency with the testing. But I mean, if you can, present that evidence and present evidence that, you did, eat meat and that it is a trace, positive. I mean, to me, that's pretty compelling evidence that you're not using.
Kurt, let me ask
because it detects for months as opposed to, I'm sorry, Dave, just urine, the clenbuterol stays in urine for just like days, like less than a week. But in the hair, it stays in months. And so it comes back negative. Right. Yeah, case closed, in my opinion. Right,
yeah. I mean, obviously, Gabe, you followed this a lot more than most, maybe all journalists in the sport of boxing. So, yeah, I mean, if this is compelling evidence for you, I'm definitely not going to disagree with you on that.
I mean, I'm not going to lie and not say, well, the kid's gotten big, but we've also watched him since he was like 17 years old, and with the very best training in the world, and treated like a true champion.
Right, and we've talked about that.
And grow into a 28-year-old.
Right.
So yeah. I might be pretty ripped from 18 to 28 if I got treated the way Canelo's been treated. A lot of people just jump to a lot of conclusions. I mean, that's the nature of Twitter, I guess.
The kid was massive at 140. Even at 147, you could still see that he was just growing. His neck looked bigger than his head, and it just kept going up and up and up. So that was no big surprise, But, the thing I was looking at was even the way Nevada had kind of handled it, and what you were mentioning a little while ago here, Kurt, on the show. To me, it almost looks like they're still fairly new to all this happening. It's such a high-profile fight that they were being just a little overcautious. Is that the sense you guys got? Because that's the sense that I got with Canelo, and this, coming back with his result with VADA. It was almost like they were in that oh God, what do we do now? We have no guideline. We have nothing to fall back on and kind of look at and see how we're going to treat this case.
You know what? It's in essence, though, they did have some precedent, and this is what bothered me as well. The whole purpose of WADA when they formed it was to bring some conformity. Now you have a code that everyone around the world can use. We're not going to have like 50 gazillion different standards. I mean, maybe Bennett could address this, and maybe the NAC could address this if you got a chance to interview them. But with even with the USADA, the UFC using USADA, these fighters who test positive, if it's about in Nevada, the commission still takes a look at it. And in the UFC, there was I guess a Chinese fighter, Jing Liang, I think. And this was in 2016, just after they had enacted the rules. And he, tested positive for clenbuterol, traced him out. USADA let him off, and so did the NAC.
Yeah.
Even with the strict liability. Now, maybe because he had tested positive before the rules went into effect, and maybe the suspension, the temporary suspension or what have you went into effect before they enacted those rules. But it's like, okay, this guy in Nevada, tests positive for clenbuterol, and you let him off. But then when it's Canelo, I mean, I don't want to throw any accusations out about the commission because I haven't spoken to them. I don't know exactly what was going on. But to me, this seemed like, all of that blowback that they got from McGregor Mayweather, where they bent the rules and they let that fight happen, and then they changed the rules on the gloves, and everyone's just like, these guys are just a rubber stamp. These guys are a doormat. All they care about is money. I don't know. To me, it looks a little fishy that Canelo, they like swing the hammer down so heavy on him, when it's a trace clenbuterol test. When they've let a fighter for the UFC under very similar circumstances, after they've enacted these strict liability rules, they let him off. So it's inconsistent. It's inconsistent.
I agree with you, inconsistency, but I think backlash as well. And I think that's where maybe they were kind of looking at was like, hey, we went through this. Let's just kind of drop that hammer down and see what happens.
I don't know Bob Bennett, and
right.
The next FBI agent. I imagine he's somewhat unflappable, but I do wonder if it seemed like a lot of people, even supporters of Triple G, didn't want this fight to happen. And people really pushing. I mean, and like right from the get, like I said, the lawyer for Triple G. I think Boxing Talk reported this, sent a letter, immediately pointing out to Bob Bennett, hey, there's strict liability here. This fight's done, essentially. You got to give the guy a suspension. But a lot of the media was really pushing this, the strict liability. No one was ever looking at mitigating circumstances. They didn't care that Canelo turned in receipts. I'm not sure why they didn't say, why there was no mention of the hair test, but, maybe it was on the off chance. He was worried about something, maybe he didn't want to mention it. I don't know. But
I guess, too, the one thing that we have to keep in mind here is this was settled out. I guess, this wasn't necessary. There was no real hearing, and, Nevada didn't really have to weigh any evidence and make a big decision. This was a settlement between the parties. So it seems like, when I saw that, what I was thinking was, very possibly Nevada was going to require him to come with more than what he did, which seems a little unfair. But I don't know if you guys are, Gabe, you may be familiar with the Contador case, the cycling case.
Yeah, a little bit.
Where that went all the way to the the International Sports Court.
Yeah.
But they basically required him to like trace that meat all the way back to the farm.
Right.
And try and prove that the farm it came from was using clenbuterol. Now, people talk about, this is so prevalent in Mexico, but the government is trying to crack down on it. So you're not going to get a farm or a slaughterhouse that's going to be like, yeah, we used it. So what?
Right.
Yeah, seriously. I use it
over here. Over here.
I do it with my cattle.
Right. So that burden of proof would have been, if that's what they were requiring from him, then that's a really high burden of proof to ask of anybody to come up with. So maybe, for Canelo, it was smart to settle out, and for the NAC, they're like, hey, we got tough on these guys. But, we're still going to preserve that fight for September.
And he did the counter. It was like, all right, I'll settle out because I'm not going to go find a cow, but I'll give you my hair. Because, I'm clean.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it seems like they were trying to build a legitimate case. Like, listen, we were not cheating. We'll do the hair test. We'll do whatever. We'll get the receipts. We'll do what you ask us to do. But
I've always found interesting about Canelo is that because he doesn't speak English, or if he does, it's privately, and he generally speaks in Spanish in public. People put a lot of things on him. He also seems to be kind of to himself a little bit reserved. And so he's thoughtful. Oh, if he smiles, oh, look at it, he's kind of playful. And in this, his silence, they put on that he's guilty. It was really interesting to watch. All the pictures, all the memes, which are, putting two pictures of a guy side by side and going, look at the difference. One he's bone dry and one he clearly has just finished working out. And you don't even know what distance the photos were taken at. All that stuff's just Twitter bullshit. This is the fact of the matter. He passed the hair test.
Right.
Sorry, I kind of interrupted you there, Dave.
I was just reading Dan Raphael's tweet saying that it's still not proof, but at least lend some credence to the meat contamination reason. But it's not proof.
I guess Dan wants to see that cow, man. Dan wants to see the cow.
I guess so. I mean, what more proof do you need? I guess he wants a tour at that cow farm, man. Wow.
I mean, listen, if it's good enough for USADA and WADA, and it's they know better than boxing Twitter. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not disparaging Dan. He has a really nice story here about it, and it's very it's full of information. But that's at some point evidence has to be enough, right? If everybody's good, I mean, it's not like we found this out and then they did the fight. The guy lost millions of dollars to this. So anyways, why don't we jump into, this was in-depth, speaking of an in-depth piece with a lot of information, and I'm not disparaging its length at all. Now, there's a fight, I don't know if you heard about Canelo and the hair test results. It came back negative, but in its place is a fight that I don't think anybody really imagined they'd ever see. Gennady Golovkin versus Martirosyan. At the StubHub Center in Carson, California. What are your thoughts on the fight, and how's it doing?
Well, as far as my thoughts on the fight, I mean, it was just they were trying to salvage the date. It would have been nice between Bob Bennett and Golden Boy that there would have been more action after the March 5th announcement of the positive test. We had a month there where really nothing was done. They kept the tickets on sale at T-Mobile, which was actually, that was a poor decision on their part, for the simple fact that the shit talking between Gennady and Canelo, since the first time they were so respectful, it actually heated it up, and everybody started, draw a lot of attention to the fight, and ticket sales really picked up after that. So if they would have, possibly they could have said, listen, due to the fact that it's consistent with meat contamination, Canelo has volunteered to do a hair test. Pending that, I think they could have saved the date. And if they couldn't save the date because of the strict liability, they should have at least given Tom Loeffler a little bit more time to build a card. And then obviously with the fallout of the commission not approving the one fighter, Spike O'Sullivan deciding he didn't want to take the fight, Martirosyan made sense because he's from Los Angeles. And, he's been in a lot of world-class fights. I remember seeing him fight Demetrius Andrade back in Corpus Christi. I've seen him fight Lara. I mean, he's a good fighter. It's just he's been kind of in a rut in his career as far as fights falling out. So it's certainly not ideal, but I know they wanted to keep the date, and they had commitments with their sponsors, commitments with HBO, and listen, they got the fight done. As far as ticketing, they've sold a lot of seats. I mean, they got a long way to go, but listen, it's a short promotion. The fact of the matter is, right off the bat, when you first go on sale, you're going to sell a lot of seats. You're going to have a little bit of a lag like every fight does. And then, the last week of the fight is when you're going to sell a good chunk, a majority of the stuff. So it's not like people have to travel to Los Angeles. LA's got so many great fight fans there already. People, just love going to the StubHub Center. It's nice that Golden Boy has got that card, the Friday beforehand. So ultimately, I think it's going to do good. Is it going to sell out? They got a long way to go, but it will set the record as far as, the biggest gate ever at StubHub Center just because of the prices. So, it's kind of, you it's a scramble, and they got it done. So hopefully it works out.